going to do with this footage is we're going to look at some of the options you have for color correcting in After Effects. So there's quite a few tools that we can play with to adjust the value of colors, the brightness and the contrast, the color channels that are coming through, as well as creating a more cinematic effect. So to start with, we're going to go over to the effects panel on the right hand side. Now, first one we're going to look at is brightness and contrast. So with brightness and contrast, this affects the amount of light that comes through and also how different colors compare to one another. So if I adjust the brightness, you can see taking it up increases the lightness in the scene. And when I adjust the contrast, this adjusts how different colors look to one another, or how they compare against each other. So I'm not going to do too much to this one, but then I'm going to check my footage again. Now with each of these effects, you can actually keyframe them to adjust them as you're moving through the footage, because it might be, like you can see in the clip here, that heaps of light comes into the scene about 10 seconds in. Next one we've added on is hue and saturation. So this affects the amount of color that comes through in the scene, as well as the different types of colors, so I can isolate color channels. So the master saturation affects the amount of each color that comes through. So by upping all the saturation, it brings up every color. And again, you can see the lightness tools in here as well. Some of these tools you will find overlap and do similar style things. Curves adjust the black and white levels in the footage. So by playing with the bar here, I can adjust the amount of white or the amount of black. Now again, this one I'm not going to do too much to. I'm quite happy where it is. I've just lightened it a little bit. Then the last option we're going to have a look at for color correction is vibrance. So vibrance is one that creates that kind of stylized cinematic footage. So by increasing the vibrance, it brings more color into the footage, as well as adjust light levels. I can also play with the saturation under vibrance as well. So I'm just going to watch through my footage and see how different objects compare. It's good to look at like how leaves and how light hits different objects. Alright, next what we're going to look at is in the effects panel, there's lots of different effects that you can put onto your footage to color correct. Each one of these, there will be some crossover, but they all perform slightly different things depending on what you're going for. There are also a range of other effects you can do to affect styles. What we're going to play with now is time remapping. So time remapping is a tool that allows you to adjust how your footage plays back, its speed, create things like freeze frames. So in this subject menu you can see different options, but if you click enable time remapping, it actually allows you to do all of those things. So when I click on time remapping, it actually creates a keyframe at the start and the end of the footage. So these are essentially moments in time. If I drag in the last moment of footage, what I've essentially done now is when I play back, it's now compressed that length of footage, say it was 15 seconds, into the 10 seconds that you can now see on the screen. Once the footage hits that keyframe, it will then leave a still frame afterwards, so a freeze frame of the last image. So I can adjust those keyframes in and out, and that'll affect the time. So that's just put it back to normal, and the clip plays as normal. What I can also do is insert keyframes along my footage. So say I only wanted to speed up a bit, or I wanted to slow down a bit, I can do that as well. So what I'm going to do now is insert a keyframe, and I've insert two keyframes. Now what I'm going to do is affect the footage between those two. So you'll see it plays normally at the beginning of the footage until it hits that first keyframe, where the footage now speeds up. Until it hits that second keyframe. But what's happened now is the distance between the two keyframes at the end has been stretched out. As a result, it means that now that footage will now play extremely slowly. So what I can do is I'll undo that first move and select both keyframes. This now keeps them in proportion so that I don't actually affect the natural time after that moment. So you'll see it's now sped up that original gap, but after it hit that keyframe, it'll go back to playing the footage at its original speed. Right, the last one I want to show you is how you can reverse time. So if I insert a keyframe, remember it's taking like an imprint or a moment in time, and click on it and drag it over a piece of footage. Now what this has done is this has actually put it behind where it's going to get to in the video. You'll see now it reverses the footage. Then after it hits that moment, it will again play forward in time. Now I'll just let this play out, and you'll see right at the end, once it hits that final frame, we'll have a freeze frame that completes all the rest of the composition, and will stay there because there's no new footage afterwards. So it should freeze, and you'll see it just plays through nice and quick.